Oh, and we're live. Here we go. Just
Wow.
needed a refresher. Boom, boom. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Super happy to have you guys on. Here we are for the first live Spill Your Heart with Lenhart. Yay.
So surprising that that didn't go perfectly. So.
Oh my gosh. I was freaking out a little bit. It's all okay now. I missed my whole special segue for you guys and everything, but whew. Anyways, quick shout out. So you see this whole banner situation that I have here. My friend Pedro, X Factor Safety Podcast. You find him on LinkedIn. I'll add him later. He's amazing. He did all this. I'm super excited about it. And Craig Struck, my friend, made this Spill Your Heart with Lenhart name before it was going to be something not so appropriate. So this is where we are now.
What are we talking about?
What do you mean? Hey, Nick. Thanks for joining us. And David. So we are going to be utilizing this comment section. So please talk. We're here to utilize that. Today we're going to be talking about servant leadership. Mm-hmm. And Joe, I guess we just get right into it.
Yeah. I want to start off by saying that there's nothing wrong with servant leadership. And I think that the theory of it that, David Greenleaf back in the 70s basically created the ideal of it and the methodology. The unfortunate part about it is that I would say from of course, MBTI perspective, that there's actually a very small percentage of people that are naturally inclined to become servant leaders that are actually, that gives them their flow state to be in a servant leadership capacity. The other thing I'd say about it, if I was critiquing it slightly, is that in large organizations, I know you're going to talk about it, it's a lot harder to actually become a servant leader. I think it tends to work in smaller groups or smaller project teams. So, and the other thing would be that the actual way that a manager manifests itself can sometimes be, doesn't help people foster their growth as much as the theory would say it would.
I agree, because you talked before about in a past life having a manager who claimed to be a servant leader and pretty much was trying to get you to tell him how to lead.
Right. So I think one of the questions that always comes up, and it really seems to happen more if you have your one-on-ones or your review, the questions you get are like, well, is there anything I can do to help you? Is there any roadblocks that are in the way that I can remove for you? Or anything that you need my help on? And it sounds great. It's very caring. It's very empathetic. It's like anything you need, just tell me. The problem is most people aren't going to self-reflect on that level and go, you know what? I have been sucking at my calls this week. They're probably just going to say, actually, I'm doing great. I mean, if something happens, I'll let you know. And then the leader goes, okay, I've served. And I think that's what tends to happen rather than the way that I have felt leadership has served me well, which is something like this. It'd be like, hey, Brittany, I've noticed that some of the proposals you sent out are coming a little bit higher than our competition. Let's work on this. Or for example, I've noticed that your communication with so-and-so colleague isn't going very well. Let's put a plan together to work on this next week, and then we'll come back and we'll reevaluate. So I feel like the leader needs to be in the capacity of finding ways to improve yourself, even if it isn't in a maybe nurturing capacity, or you can finesse it, but it tends to be more of like, what can I do? Nothing. Okay.
Right. And so everyone doesn't get triggered. What he's saying, is that this can happen sometimes. It almost can be a form of leadership that can be lazy in expecting like, well, I'm just going to let this 360-degree feedback be, what's going to teach me how to lead. And sometimes you need to be a bit more proactive than that. That's not all servant leaders, but that can be a con to servant leadership from our experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm already seeing some people saying not their experience. Well, I think that's true because I would say that there are some people who can do a little bit of both, who are nurturing, but they can also say like, look, I think that you would be better served if you tried this out for a change, and then we can reevaluate. But it comes across as, I'm not telling you, I'm just making a suggestion in a way that you're like, all right, I'm going to try it because I believe this, I respect this person, I believe they know what they're saying, and everyone has a desire to grow. And that's why I pitch MBTI, because it's about growing. And if a leader can see potential, they're much, and they see that you just need a little bit more direction. That's where servant leadership can be most effective. But I wanted you to talk about where, as you get too big, like the organization becomes too broad, how you can nurture and listen and do all the things that require you to have a lot of time and know the person on a personal level. Because that's part of it too, is we don't just focus on work, we focus on them in the personal life. So can you speak to that in a large organization?
So offline, we kind of I wanted to start small and then get big. So for example, in the military, it's easier to be a servant leader when you're like just getting airmen, for example, or soldiers or whatever. You have just like a few. So you can be more intimate with them and be more personable, and it's easier to be a servant leader and serve them, if you will. Mm-hmm. But once you get bigger into a lot higher ranks, so we're talking, VP level ranks, you can have literally 800 people. How are you going to have that type of servant-based leadership when it's that broad? You can't. We can still internally want that, but want in one hand in the other. At the end of the day, you have to find a different way to lead.
Well, Chris Whipple said, well, maybe we should just push servant leadership downstream. So it's like the VP tells the director or hires a director who he believes he or she has, oh, that's awesome. Okay, has servant leadership. And you create a culture of it. And that might be the way around it, is where you have to have the very top person be a servant leader, because if you only have one project manager who does it, but the CEO, the leader, or the board doesn't believe in it, then it's going to have what you always talk about is a very broken culture. So this would be kind of controversial, but you mentioned on the last show that we had the idea of it's the great man or the big man theory. I don't exactly know what it's called, but I think this is basically the cult of personality, which is sort of like you have a culture based around one figure. And obviously we can point to many places in history where that was negative, but I think when you have a leader at the top of the organization that is, you believe in their vision and their goal, everyone unites around that person, rather than a theory of servant leadership where it's harder to grasp, rather than a vision for the company that a certain person can fulfill. Do you have any thoughts on that? I know cult of personality is very I think, Mao and stuff like that, but I don't want to stigmatize it, but I think sometimes that is more effective.
I do want to talk about that, and I'm going to put up Courtney Smith here. He's a CEO of Da Vinci Vaporizers. I had him on my podcast, and he is a great example of this. He has an amazing work culture, and he's a great leader. And because of how he is, he's infected his people in a good way as to how things should be done. He's made a good work culture. As the work culture consultant, this excites me, and because at the top, he has done that, and it's just spread downward in a good way. So his people then want to act and be like him because people look up to him.
Okay. I mean, obviously we can see negative examples of that, but you would want someone leading the military to have everyone believing in the mission or the goal, or just like you can even point to a president or a king or a leader like that. Like you can obviously point to someone like Julius Caesar was a leader. I mean, people would say he was authoritarian, but you could say at least everyone believed in his vision, and that was the way we were going. There's figures of movements that you think of civil rights, you think of Martin Luther King. He's a symbol of a movement that we believed in his vision. So he was not a servant leader. He brought everyone along, like he was leading the charge. So I look at that and go, it definitely works. It's just, if I was using what I like to use, the lens I like to look at everything is MBTI. The research I've done has shown me that there are two types, the ESFJ and the ENFJ, that would be natural servant leaders. And the reason I say that is because their first cognitive function would be extroverted feeling. They understand what unites people. That's the first thing they use all the time. Other types, like the ESTJ, which tend to be 90% of all corporate leaders, are not great with harmony, but they're super effective at getting things done. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be, I'm super good at getting things done and I'm amazing with understanding people and what drives them. So if I was placing someone and I was looking at it from that point of view, I look for the ENFJ or the ESFJ. And if you've ever been around those people, you know that they're great coaches, leaders, and mentors. That's how I like to look at everything now.
Well, it's kind of like the crazy hot scale.
Yeah. Oh, yes. You literally cannot have, yes. Or you're talking to a dude. I'm just kidding.
Exactly. There's one for girls too. But the crazy hot scale, there are unicorns, right? And it's the same thing for leaders with this. Like there are unicorn, higher ups at the top that can be both. It's just rare. It's super rare. And the majority of people are not both. So know what you know and know what you don't know. And if you're not so good at something, just try harder. Know what you don't know.
Interesting topic. Trying harder. I see that all the time from leaders. It's like, I don't care, just work harder. I don't know if that's the kind of advice that I don't know where to go with that, because work harder on what? Where am I missing? And I guess in a servant, was that?
Your MBTI, take an assessment, see where you.
Yeah, that's what I like to. That's kind of where I go with it. But that's where I would go with it. I would see like what person naturally has that tendency, and then putting them in a position of power. But do you think that anyone can adopt it, or is it something that's innate? Can you teach someone to be a servant leader?
Well, like we talked on our other video, I do have a feeling about leader. And so I'm going to quote some things I had notes for. Margaret Thatcher, power is like being a lady. If you have to say you are, you aren't. Drops mic. Because you don't have to say, I'm a leader. I'm a leader. No, your people will tell you if you're a leader. You don't get to dub yourself one. Okay.
So Robert Greenleaf basically said that servant leadership is someone that has an innate drive to serve and lead others. So would calling yourself a leader, so you're saying that a servant, in his mind, a servant leader would not ever call themselves a leader. They would just start doing the things that naturally lead, and then someone would be like, well, you're in charge, and you'd be like, oh, I guess I am in charge. I didn't really ever consider myself that. So those two theories line up with what you're saying.
Right, let's just do it. Like, you don't have don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah. Well, you're always talking about where leadership and culture mix and what you think needs to happen. And one of the things I want to say on that is I think people should start their own companies and then make the culture they want, because I think it's much harder to change a big enterprise unless you're changing the top, because like I believe a fish rots from the head down.
Yep.
Right. So you're not going to change it from middle management. You're going to have to go all the way up. And I think you've said that before too.
You have to, I know a lot of people don't like it, but they have to understand there's a difference between macro culture and microculture. There's a huge difference. You can change what you can down here from a position of not so much authority. But you can only do so much. You can try to make it the best you can, but at the end of the day, you might just be polishing a turd if the top, sorry, it's a military term, but at the top, if they're not in alignment, if they don't care about the culture, it'll trickle downhill. And I did want to bring up a comment here from Shauna Elliott. It depends on the leader, not the leadership philosophy. I have led organizations, and pretty much she's saying that she's a servant leader, even though she's had thousands of people. And I'm not saying that people can't be servant leaders and have a ton of people. It's just that at a certain level, in your heart, you can be a servant leader and still have those principles, but you're maybe not on a daily basis anymore just doing servant leadership. Because it's a very intimate situation. You can still have the heart, if you will, but I just don't believe that from that level it can be that as effective as having just a few people.
Well, I think that's the main difference. So is the goal results? Because a lot of people look at it like that. Is the goal just being an effective leader? And I would say, yeah, it's about being an effective leader. So it's means and ends, and the confusion there. It's, well, if I hit the sales number, hit the quota, or we hit the number so that the shareholders are happy, then that's a good leader. I mean, you could have a ton of attrition and you turn over your whole workforce 100% of every year. But I wonder, because some people are like, well, it's just about the results and we'll just churn and burn. So or is it about the impact it has on people? Is it about the legacy you leave as a leader, or is it about, well, I was effective? See, someone I think about is like Jack Welch. He's a very famous leader of GE, or I mean, he died recently, but he was known for being one of the most savvy businessmen ever. And he turned GE around, and tons of books have been written about his leadership, but he, as a manager, he chopped GE in half and like sold everyone's job overseas. So I don't know if people like in the company really liked him that much, but the shareholders did, and he turned GE around. So he was effective, but he's not someone that you would be a servant leader.
Right. There's a lot of people I've heard that have disapproved of his leadership style, if you will.
I think he was the guy that decided you just fire 10% of the bottom workforce every year, no matter what. Just the bottom 10%. Someone can comment on it. I think I might be getting the wrong person, but I think he was the one that just said you lay off 10% of your bottom workforce every year, just as a standard operating procedure.
That's intense, but I mean, if I guess what does the lower 10% mean? The one that's not producing, the ones that have bad reviews, or is that 10% of just the blue collar people?
I guess it'd just be like, if in a sales org, who's producing the bottom 10% would have to go. So there's just examples of he's very effective at getting things done, but does that translate to universal love by the people that he led? I don't know. And I think that's what servant leadership is like when you like people have a feeling about you, and when you leave the company or they leave the company, they're better, and they look at and say that person is the reason I'm better.
At the end of the day, I feel like leadership has, like, from a personal perspective of anybody, if they want to be a leader, they feel they are a leader, they are. At the end of the day, it has to do with personal satisfaction. Even if you're a servant leader, there is a me in that. There is a me in that. There's some selfishness in that. And it doesn't mean it's bad, but it makes you feel good to serve other people. It makes you feel good to feel selfless and help other people. And sometimes at the end of the day, if you were to die tomorrow and you were just happy that you either got results and high profits or whatever, or that you had an effect on someone's life in a positive way. It really just depends on the person.
It does. So I'm just, like I prefaced it, I'm not against it. I just think that there is a very small amount of people who are really naturally inclined to be that way. And you got to hire for that, and you have to ask the right questions in the interviews, and you have to ask the right things to get that person in the seat. And they have to spend a good amount of time with people to really nurture growth and make others leaders, as the end goal of leadership is when you leave it, you create other leaders in your wake, basically.
Leaders create more leaders. Someone said that, not me, but it's great.
Yeah, that's funny. You should just start quoting yourself, because I have seen that so often on LinkedIn where people quote themselves, and I'm like, wow, that's when you know you've made it. Where it's like you post a picture of yourself speaking at a conference and you have your own quote. It's like, wow, I don't think I can start quoting myself yet. You might be able to.
If I was to die tomorrow, I would hope that if I could be remembered for something other than the work culture consultant, it would be the moment you give something a name, you give it the ability to have an extremism. I made that up.
You made that up.
Real talk.
So what's an example? Is it like any word, or like if you label like culture climate, for example? Are you talking about just like phrases? Because I feel like you're onto something, but explain it to me.
Without getting too political, because I don't do that here on LinkedIn.
Don't get political. This is a family show. Family show.
PG. Feminism.
I see.
That's a word that people use, and maybe at one time it was great, and maybe now not so much sometimes, depending on the person. But you gave something a name. Instead of just being like, hey, as a woman, I want the same rights as everyone else, and I think this is great. And do you need a name for that? You just want to be a human who has
I
the
see.
same rights as everybody else. You don't need to throw a name on it. That's why I don't subscribe to throwing names on things, because somebody will take that and just go
the wrong direction. Yeah.
And ruin it. They will ruin it. So don't let something get ruined, because then you'll get on the other side of the fence with the bad people who man bash and make it men are the devil. And I don't do that. So ending the subject there, that's where that quote comes from.
So are you saying that somebody's going to like take servant leadership and run it into the ground or ruin its good name?
Yes, I mean, 167,000 people on LinkedIn, if you put it in the search box, claim that they are servant leaders. So I would say that there's a high probability that, maybe half of those people are probably not. It just sounds good because it's the, flavor of the week.
There's 2,900 job results that need servant leaders. So there's quite a lot of jobs that there's way more servant leaders than there are jobs out there, I guess, that require it.
Noted.
So interesting.
I did want to bring this up. We're kind of talking about the Western thing with Greenleaf. So there's actually some Eastern philosophies, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but Lao Tzu, TZU, he says, a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, they will all say, we did it ourselves. And this is in relation to servant leadership. We did it ourselves. It's like, I want to talk about that. What do you guys in the comments feel like that means to you? Because spicy. I like it.
Yeah, it almost sounds demeaning just for a second, where you're like, he doesn't even exist. Hold on, let me chew on that for just a second. And because everyone gets credit. And I think that is one of the traditional model. And then you have a traditional leadership, and then you have the servant leadership, which is when you look at kind of the pros cons, one of the things is who gets credit. Oh, my team did a great job. You see that all the time with, quarterbacks in the NFL. They interview the quarterback, and they're like, you played so well. He's like, no, my team did great. Or then there's other guys like, yeah, I'm amazing. I'm the best.
Larry Fitzgerald. Woo!
Okay. So that's an example of someone that immediately goes to, no, I was just one piece of the puzzle that got that done. And that's really empowering to a lot of people, because then every single person in the hierarchy feels that they're valued. And if they were to leave the company, then that would be negative. So like, I think it fosters a lot more long-term people that stay there. You definitely get less, you get higher retention, less attrition.
Right. And I mean, that's why I always preach on LinkedIn, about turnover and work culture, because it goes hand in hand. You want to know why your people are, and I was just talking to someone that will not be named in the military about, they're like, I'm losing people left and right. This is not, and I'm like, this is higher than you. This is a higher issue than you. And then so it starts at the top, but it's an issue at the top that needs to be fixed, but it starts, and this is what I say to my clients, at day 0, onboarding people. That entire process is where your culture starts. This is what I do. This is what I do as your work culture consultant, because day 0 is when you have a job posting that you put out there that is well done, makes sense, has your values, has your culture understood just here. You are advertising for, you want good people. So you better be hustling yourself and your company. This isn't just, well, of course they should work for me. No. That's not how you're going to get good talent.
I'm totally on that page too about, I don't think people as much as I think that there's not as much stigma as like, I want to work for Google. It's like, yeah, but I mean, it's kind of old news. Like, people want just a good company. I don't think the notoriety or the status of like being at a big company means as much anymore. I think that if you want a servant leader, like we keep talking about, and we've mentioned, a smaller company, more intimate, would be somewhere you'd want to go if that's the style of leadership you prefer. And I think there's a lot to be said by some people don't care what kind of leaders they are as long as they just let them do their thing. And I wonder, because it kind of goes, we never really talk about it from, well, what is the employee like? Because I can work very isolated, but some people need interaction and might prefer to have someone like a servant leader. But I can also work with under kind of authoritarian regimes and be fine as well. So it's more just like isolated maybe to each person. So
yeah, I mean,
I don't know if I think there has been studies done showing that like you get better retention with certain leadership, but you get better results with authoritarian. So yeah, I don't think we're going to solve that too soon.
Yeah, today, but definitely good subjects to talk about. Because I mean, the military, you know, I've been yelled at like crazy, you know, knife hand, all that stuff. There's a reason they do that and it works.
Okay.
You know, and in certain levels of training. And they're kind of getting away from that in basic right now. And that's why they're having the issues that they're having. I'm just putting the military on blast. I love y'all. You did a lot for me, but that's what the issue is recently. There's a lot, they're getting a lot real soft. And that is not working anymore.
That's not working.
It's their onboarding, right? That's their equivalent basic training in tech school. That's their onboarding process in the military. And if that gets soft, which that's proof that they have, and now they're having issues, well, common denominator.
Yeah. Well, see, Franco Butera, he said managers drive to promote themselves, leaders drive to promote others. And I think that is exactly what SBL is, servant-based leadership is. It's like managers that try to climb the hierarchy are managers, and then leaders just try to promote others, and then in return, a good culture will promote them as well. So subtle difference, but you can see those people. It's funny because, like, you know, you can see those people from a mile away, like they're just a corporate climber. Those people tend not to be servant leaders.
Right.
I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oops, wrong one. I want to touch on this one. That was a really good point.
Oh, nice.
Thank you, Alice. Because this is true.
Well, maybe he's got a really good point that it's so vague that anyone can claim to be it, because like they're like, oh well, number 2 is me, or out of the top 10, like 2 and 7, that's me. I'm a servant leader. Maybe that's a great point.
I think it's a great point too, because it's all up to interpretation. It's all opinion based. I mean, to a point, it's opinion based. It's all philosophy. You know, when I get back into my PhD that have on hold right now, you know, it's all philosophies. I'll get back. Oh, that's a good segue.
Oh yeah, we forgot to. We should have prefaced this show, everyone. We're actually not qualified to speak on any subject because we don't have a PhD. So if everyone just wants to turn off this live right now, you can just, we have to get the right degree to talk on LinkedIn. So we were very generously informed of this yesterday.
Yes, that we should not be doing this live because we don't have PhDs and we don't know what we're talking about. Tell Tony Robbins that too while we're at it.
Yeah.
You have to have a PhD to talk about this stuff.
Yes. So
anywho,
that's just funny. Yeah. Shout out to that person.
But let's see, another thing here. So I Googled it too, right? You know, because like, number 2, they are, I feel like I'm that, so I must be that. The very first Google search of servant leadership, right? So I Googled one, and one of the cons I found was healing. Healing was one of the principles of servant-based leadership.
Right.
And here's where I see a bit of a con. It can be a con. Some people don't want to be saved. Some people do just want to come in, do their job, do it well, and go home. And where a lot of leaders get things twisted, if you will, is that you can do more. You know, we can do. Some people don't want that. And you are going to you're not going to retain someone if you keep pushing them towards something they don't want. Maybe they don't want to be a manager. And that happens so much. They don't want to be a manager. They don't want people. Don't put someone like that over people. You are doing a disservice to them and people. Quit it. Stop that. Quit.
Well, do you believe in the Peter principle?
Expound.
That where people rise to the highest level of their incompetence.
That's a thing.
Well, the funnier one is the Dilbert principle. Scott Adams came up with this, where he said that corporations systematically put the worst performers in management to get them out of the workflow. And I was like, that's kind of funny. And it's kind of what you're saying, where it's like some people just promote in a position that they shouldn't, like that's like a natural progression, but is not what they're going to, like they should be in. So that's another hard thing, is like, well, I'm supposed to get the promotion and the pay raise, but like I shouldn't be there.
Right. And it's just like, what are you doing as someone in the company of higher rank? Why would you do that to your business?
Can you highlight Chris Whipple's comment? It's a good question. The 531.
Boom.
Yeah. This is great. What do you have to say to that?
Do you have to be at the top to be a servant leader? Can a worker? Like we were saying earlier, I definitely think it's more. It can be anyone. My philosophy is that you're better serving people at a lower level that you have like more intimate relationships with, like 5 people, 10 people, as opposed to at the top where you have 800 plus people. You can be a servant-based leader at heart and have those intentions, like I want this for my people, everyone. That's great. But those intimate relationships that servant-based leadership usually is about, it's not sustainable. You can't have relationships that are intimate with 800 people. You just can't. I'm sorry. So that's why, like, you can have that in your heart, and you can even start off there, and then, don't forget where you came from. Once you get back up here, like she was saying earlier, you can still have that in your heart and do great things with that, but you can't be as intimate with people. That's just what it is.
So, and then Franco just wrote again, we once had everyone write on the wall, what do you want to be remembered by when you leave? And he said it's an eye opener and tells a lot about who they are. That's cool, because it's sort of like,
I like that.
Think about it in the sense of you onboard a new person, and they write that, and that's like they're stuck with that. So it's like if they ever get out of line, it's like, well, remember, or by that action, when you leave, are we going to remember you by that? And then it's like it's a reframing. So I like that as a beginning tactic to keep people in line. It's the same thing that you always harp on, is people or companies have a mission statement, but that's at the beginning, and sometimes they quickly forget as they grow what it is. So in his sense, like the mission statement keeps the corporation on track, and what Franco said keeps individuals on track for the rest of their career there. So that's an awesome, it's a very hot take.
Yes, I thank you, Franco, because I'm going to jot that down for later. That's great. So many people can just be like, oh man, well, I don't want to be remembered for how I've been the past, whatever. And then you brought up mission and how people forget it. And with all this remote stuff going on with COVID, I've hounded on that too. Like if you're having a hard time bringing your culture from physical to virtual, you need to start harping back on what is the mission here, because that's going to drive us. What's the vision? We need to talk about that again, and just the values in a good way. Not beating people up.
Your authoritarian streak is coming out. You're like, we got to pound the values into people. Yeah. It's a hybrid. It's like half servant, half authoritarian, it's a hybrid role. I don't know what I'm saying, but that is kind of what you're advocating, which I'm fine with.
It's a tough thing. Like I said, I don't call myself a leader. It is what it is, whatever that people want to call me. However, I've had people that have missed me when I left as their boss, so we can say whatever we want with that. And there was moments where I couldn't just be nice all the time. I am pretty black and white person with little bits of gray as an INTJ. And I didn't yell at people or nothing like that. It was more, disappointed mom talk is much more effective than yelling.
Yeah. Even
in the military. Like I said, that there's phases of the military, and each branch is different. Air Force, we're a little bit more sedity, but at the end of the day, there's just more. It's like learning languages. Like everyone learns different. Learn better in certain ways, and the same way with leadership. Not everyone is going to be is going to take it the same way. It's like the love languages I brought up before, the business love languages. Not everyone is going to be happy that you just gave them a raise. Maybe they're happy with the money, but they would like a more of a title promotion situation. Maybe they're more of an awards person that can put a big award on their resume. Like there's so many different ways that you can appease people and retain them your leadership efforts, but you need to listen as to what makes that person tick. And that's where a lot of people, I do genuinely feel, have it confused. They think everyone, it's the same way.
Well, so listening is the number one principle of servant-based leadership.
Yep.
And listening to empathy, kind of what you just described. So it's listen to what makes them tick, what's their motivation, and then being aware of awareness is number 4. And then I think 5 is persuasion. So it's like, and the way I would see it is we know what makes them tick, but we also see some of their faults, but we also can persuade them to, in a way that's not authoritarian or putting them down, slightly, maybe we should try it this way. Maybe what we should do is like, what do you think about that? Does that sound like a plan? Can we try that new strategy? Because I only think it's going to be helping you. There's just a lot of tact involved. I think one of the things that is overlooked with servant-based leadership is how tactful you have to be because of how many different people you're working with. So you really have to know each person. This is the whole thing about knowing each person intimately, so you know what makes each person tick. Oh, emotional intelligence. Okay.
Thank you, Will, because that's me every day. I just love talking about it because with all this, it's so true. Just like you said, with this listening, if they just listen to their people and use their emotional intelligence and maybe intuition to be like, maybe this doesn't work so well with my employee. Let me try something else instead of just hounding on the same thing over and over again. Like you're beating a dead horse. Try something new.
Well, let me ask you this because someone brought it up earlier about, it was what was his name? Rawless. He brought up how it's so vague, but is emotional intelligence even more vague? Or I know the book, I know Daniel Goleman, all that, but the principles of it, it's not like a style. It's just whether or not you have how good you are at having emotional intelligence. So is that also pretty vague to define as well or not? I need the education. Actually, I'm not that smart at EI.
Debatable. I think you have good EI.
But I don't know how my thing is, I don't know how, because it seems to be like there's this new assessment called EQI. It's like it's emotional intelligence assessment. Oh, you got that? Okay.
Yeah.
So how is that used? Is it in conjunction with servant-based leadership? Can only people that score high in emotional intelligence be servant-based leaders? I just want to know what the application of it is, or do they work together, or am I just talking?
It could very much be something that anyone makes up. You could maybe servant leaders do have more IQ. I haven't read anything about that. I'm sure there's possibly those out there, but I think someone who is more a servant leader, they're more about their people, needs to have better EQ to be effective. Like you said, the listening, that's a big thing. And not only listening to reply, but listening to understand, what are these people trying to tell me? And maybe my employee just snapped on me and it's not normal for them. So you're like, oh, excuse me, what? And hey, they're not normally like that. So maybe something happened in their personal life. Something I don't know. Don't assume, because that makes it out of you and me. So stop assuming. And use your emotional intelligence to be like, well, that's not normal behavior for them. So let's try to figure out what this is, address that, and then press before we just automatically get angry as a leader or manager and be like, they just talk to me like that. Well, take your ego, throw it out the door, and try to figure it out first. There's levels to that. But that is always my advice, to try for that first.
Can you highlight Franco's question? I like this one. I don't have an answer quite yet. How do you guide someone who doesn't believe they need to learn anything or need help? Just fire them. Simple. Risky, that would be a style. That would be a style. That would be more authoritarian. It's like, well, they're not going to listen, then, we don't have time. I don't have time to nurture this person. So
Reverse psychology is a good one for this. And some people are gonna be like, oh no. But I mean, there's ways you can use it that aren't negatively manipulative, but just like, okay, well, what do you know? And we'll figure out what you don't know with what you do know. You tell me. Like, you know, if you're gonna have someone that has a big ego like that, and it's, well, checkmate. I'm gonna try you now. Okay, there's a way to do that professionally.
So you're just calling their bluff on how much they know?
Because then you put them in a situation where like, oh, well, now I got to back up what I've, throwing out there. So, talk about it. You don't have to be, rude. But like, no, let's talk about this. Because if like Franco, for someone you're trying, something they don't know, but they feel like they just don't want to hear it, make them explain something specific, whatever that job, duty, whatever that is. And if they can't, because if you don't know something well enough to explain to a kindergartner, you don't understand it.
That's you're still in Einstein now.
You
gotta give credit where credit's due.
Hey, I don't know who it was, but if that's him,
no, it is. It's, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you don't understand it. And I just recently started thinking about that as well, which is like theory and personality. It's like if you get too much in the weeds on anything, you're losing people. So, sorry to Sagu. Someone said, Chris said, servantly lead them right out the door, which is hilarious because you can also, it's funny, but it's also like, there's also a good way to let people go where they feel like they're not kicked out the door, where they feel like they're much better served being somewhere else. And that like, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm going to help you in your transition. I'll write a reference, recommendation, something like that. So that's also servant leadership when people are leaving.
Absolutely. And it's good for workplace violence. And, some people do it. That's a reality. It's one of my other interviews I've had with someone in security. Philip, he was talking about how his company sometimes is hired to make sure that when someone's getting walked out the door, it's safe, because there are really high risk situations sometimes. So I do think it's a great advice that you had there to how this is going to serve you to go elsewhere, which is true. Sometimes people just don't jive with your culture. That's why during the job, in your job description and in the interview process, you as a company should make it very known what your culture is about. So that person is like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not about this life.
Yeah. You always get kind of a sales pitch on the culture. So it's a little bit tough to always get but I think you can ask the right questions during your interview. And I think it is good to have some pretty bad cultures when you first start, just to kind of break yourself into like, okay, here are the extremes and here's what I want. And then if you are fortunate enough to get into management, look back at that and go, well, I certainly don't want that. And what I used to go through. So yeah, you need some bad culture to understand the good stuff. So
I totally agree. You need bad managers too, because I've had a lot more bad than good, but some of them have been my best teachers of what not to be. And same with the culture stuff. When I walked out of my last, well, not my last, but anyways, a last situation that was very toxic, I was like, this is a poster child in a book, maybe one day, of what not to be at all in any way, shape, or form. And so it's good because then you appreciate the next place you go to, because it's probably better because you've done your due diligence to make sure you didn't put yourself in that situation again.
Yeah. We're just killing it here on this live.
7 minutes. Thank you everyone for the comments. This is a first for me. It's my first LinkedIn live. So I'm super happy you guys came on. I'm like sitting here trying to pay attention to everything. So this is
the comments are great. The comments are great. I love this whole like adding value to our conversation.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, this is great. I need to apply to be on it because this is great. I think we should now, or not now, but our next show, we should do like a roundup on how we think LinkedIn Stories is going.
That's
interesting. There are so many thoughts on that, and I know And I wonder if do you think we can just talk for 2 seconds on it? Do you think that if it turned out to be terrible, they would get rid of it, or do you think we'll always have LinkedIn stories?
Probably here to stay, because it's each thing that they've put on so far has stayed. Polls stayed and everything else. So, and if people use them if they smartly use polls, that can be used to your advantage for content purposes, like I've used. But I've literally seen people like, what's your favorite animal? And I'm like, stop. And then people go, don't tell me what to post on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay, what's Facebook? Fine.
Well, I really didn't. I thought that polls was going to be a disaster, but it hasn't. And it has not overwhelmed, or like everyone's using polls. So maybe it's not going to be something where stories is going to be like, it's just going to be sort of like what kind of coffee did you have this morning? And it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, like cool. And like I've been using, old graphics that I've had that, are good. I think they're great. And I'm like, well, I guess recycle these if it has a value add of something. Right. I just think that as long as all of us who enjoy creating content and people who like to consume content, if we give the people what they want, and I think what they want is value add. So we should try our best to do that. But who am I?
No, you don't have a PhD, so I don't.
Here we go. Here we go.
You don't deserve anything.
No.
One thing that would be cool to add is during this live chat, like on YouTube, where they have like the super chat where you can throw money at people. Now that's a revenue stream. But right. I'd have to figure that out. But that's a really great comment. 50 cents.
50 cents. $3.50.
Yeah. Hey, have enough hot takes in one episode, you can really make a couple dollars.
And guys, ladies, gentlemen, if you see down below that banner, "Making the Truth Great Again" is my tagline for this show. I just, as you know me, and if you've been following me for a while, I like to just speak what's on my mind and call out things for what they are. So that is where that came from. And I thought it was jazzy.
You just made me think of something. So Nassim Taleb, like one of my favorite philosophers, he said that the truth at all costs lowers every other cost. So if you can get closer to the truth, then it across the board makes everything more prosperous. So as Brittany goes towards the truth, it lowers all other costs for us. So some people may not be like, that's why you're perfect for this platform, is because you're just controversial enough, but you're saying what a lot of people are thinking. They're like, oh, finally someone said it. All right. And there's going to be haters out there. There's going to be people that unfollow you or block you or whatever, but we're getting closer to the truth all the time. So thank you.
I appreciate you.
And thank you for having me on.
Oh, I love having you on, friend. How do we meet? Can you tell the peoples?
Yeah, I think I searched for other INTJs on LinkedIn and I found you. And then I was trying to think, just all of a sudden we're on the phone, and then I was texting you, and they were like, we need to do an interview. And that's just those LinkedIn, that's like how a LinkedIn relationship develops in the best possible, like it would be like a user story if LinkedIn wanted to use it. Like, here's how LinkedIn turned these two amazing people into, multi-millionaire LinkedIn Live hosts or something like that.
Right. No, I think the relationship aspect that you can get here on LinkedIn is it's great. It's undervalued. If people, they're just starting to get onto LinkedIn, I have made some amazing connections, you being one of them, and it's turned into a friendship. We BS with each other, send each other great memes. I love it.
All the time, yeah.
The shenanigans that people don't see. But I guess it's time to wrap this up. That's all dope. We did
I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone for the great comments, making us look good by answering your questions. So let's do this again very soon.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Spill your heart with Lenhart. Talk to you soon.